My son and precious daughter-in-law decided to finally get married after being engaged for a long time. And I had known...
Thank you, everyone.
I had been to a little venue south of Houston for a previous event, and it was a beautiful venue, and the food was fabulous. And so I approached the owner about us possibly having the reception at this venue. And at the time I approached her, she said, "Oh, I know this young and upcoming chef, and you will be so happy." And so we made arrangements, and we met with Chef Rob. He just talked about how wonderful his food was and how what a great chef he was and how happy we were going to be. And my husband and I went because they were paying for their wedding themselves, and we offered as their mother and father to pay for the reception.
Okay, got it.
To
so
help
you
them.
hired the defendant?
Yes, I hired the defendant.
How long have you been in the catering business?
Well, I'm not a caterer at all, to start out with. I am a private chef. There's a difference between catering, which is unfortunately just a bunch of reheating and serving food. I come in and I try to prepare a nice meal for people and try to give them something that they can be proud of.
How long have you been a chef?
I've been a chef for 2 years now. I've been working in the food industry for 10 years.
I find that very interesting since his business card said Big Rob's Catering.
Well, I carry the business cards for my company.
You have catering on your business card?
No, ma'am.
We met with him on that night. I gave him a non-refundable deposit on the night that we met with him.
Was that prior to you having the tasting?
Yes, ma'am.
In hindsight, that probably wasn't a good idea, right?
No, ma'am, that was not a good idea at all.
So what kind of food did you ultimately decide to have at the wedding?
We did ultimately decide on the Mexican food, but that was after a failed tasting of a pasta dish that he had played up about how wonderful it was.
So you tried the pasta and didn't like it?
Oh, no, ma'am. And come to find out, he didn't even make the pasta for the tasting. He was too busy, and a friend of his made the pasta.
So I'm just curious, why did you go forward and continue to hire him and use his services if you didn't like the pasta?
Because I had $450.
And that was non-refundable?
Yes, it absolutely was placed on the one referral.
Do you have a copy of the contract?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Let me see it. So you ultimately decided to have Mexican food at the wedding. Tell me about the tasting.
After we had the initial tasting with the Italian option, my wife and I were extremely underwhelmed, but we decided, well, we're in for this $400. Let's see what other options might be available. So Chef Rob kindly offered to have a second tasting for us.
No, I beg your pardon.
At an additional cost of $135.
What happened at the tasting?
He came over to my place, prepared the meal, and, Your Honor, it was fantastic.
Who drafted this contract?
Me. I did, Your Honor.
At the top of the contract, it says Rob's Event Catering.
Thank you.
I mean, I think you might be confused about what you do.
It was a contract that I had previously used with the same event. And so at that point, I was working with another chef, or my chef, and he said, well, we need to change you up because this is not what you do.
Okay, so take me to the wedding.
Oh.
So you're at the wedding reception. The wedding has happened, and I assume that everything went well at the ceremony.
It was absolutely gorgeous.
Wonderful. By the way, do you have a picture of you and your bride?
Yes, I do.
Beautiful, wonderful, very nice. You get to the wedding reception, what happens with the food?
Well, we have a cocktail hour. I have since found out from our guests that they were out on the portico for anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes before any food was even produced for the cocktail hour. They had just come from having their pictures done, had not been out to the cocktail hour very long, and the venue owner came and said he's plating the food. And I said, okay, let's go. And so I hurried everybody in. We sat down. After a few minutes, a waiter dressed in blue jeans and a shirt at a nighttime wedding started bringing food out.
Had you discussed with the defendant what the servers were going to wear?
No, we didn't. I assumed that a nighttime formal wedding with long dresses and that the staff would come dressed appropriately for that event.
Did you think it was appropriate for them to wear jeans?
Yes, ma'am, I did. When you're outside in Houston, Texas, this is what we wear. I'm wearing the same thing today as I wore that evening, besides the fact that I was wearing a chef coat.
Well, but it's not your wedding. Why didn't you go to the plaintiff and say, is it okay if we wear jeans to this evening event?
In the first meeting, ma'am.
No.
I said, this is what I wear. This is what I will be wearing.
I mean, you're lucky you didn't run into a bridezilla, because I can tell you right now,
well, we didn't,
I would have told you to go back home and change.
We didn't run into a bridezilla. We ran into a mother-in-law.
Who wrote the check to you? Mother-in-law.
Now, I can get behind the issue of the caterers and the waiters showing up wearing blue jeans to a wedding. I can understand why you're upset by that. But let's stick to the task at hand. Was the food bad? Because if the food was very delicious, and this is just my experience and my take, I could completely turn a blind eye to the fact that they're wearing blue jeans. Now, I'm no bride, and I'm no bridezilla, but I do know that when it comes down to being, a mother / mom-in-law, they tend to want to be a little bit particular about all the details. And if I were running a business, I would say, hey, we're going to wear slacks, a button-up t-shirt, whatever it is, and it's going to be fine. Blue jeans and a t-shirt, dude, it's such an easy fix. But is it enough to sue somebody for it? I don't know yet. I don't know if I can get behind that. Now, if the food was awful, or if it wasn't what they ordered, or if it was completely different than they did the tasting, now that I can get behind. So let's see what the food was like.
Let's look at the photo.
This is the dinner that when I was giving them their tasting. So I have the carne asada.
And is this how the entree looked at the wedding?
We did our very best to replicate what we had done at the tasting. What is the laughter for? Have you ever worked in the kitchen before?
Because you're sounding sketchy. That's what the laughter's for. Let's go to the next photo. Okay, so what is this?
So this is what we brought as the food.
This is what we were served and was served to our guests.
Are you saying, sir, that
I was not proud of that photo.
dish...
I'm not proud of that plate. No, ma'am.
Oh, so you're not proud of it?
No, ma'am.
So you know you didn't do a good job.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
They only get one shot at their wedding, their first wedding, and it is your job to make it right the very first time.
Yes, ma'am.
And so for you to come in here and tell me that you're not proud of the job you did, but you won't refund their money, why? Why won't you refund their money?
I followed my contract. It states that they do not have time until if there's a payment made, they have 24 hours within that payment to make a complaint.
Your Honor, at the end of the wedding, we were offered the remaining portions of the food.
Do you have a letter from the catering hall?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I have a notarized letter from the catering hall.
May I see that,
I
please?
also, Your Honor, of the remaining portions that he sent home with us, I put some of the remaining portions of meat that we were served that night in my freezer, and I brought it with me from Texas today.
You brought meat?
That's against health code, just saying.
What is that exactly?
This is beef fajita meat from our son's wedding. You can plainly see that does not look anything like what was shown in the tasting photos.
I'm sorry, how can you bring stuff from how far back? From your freezer?
Ms. Carmen, the wedding is over, and I understand that you paid him the remainder of the balance due after the wedding. Why did you do that?
Unfortunately, yes, Your Honor,
Why did
I
you do
did.
that if you were so unsatisfied with his service?
Because it was my son's day and my daughter-in-law's day. I just was going to pay him and let things go. On Sunday, I really thought about it. On Sunday evening, I finally had a chance to sit down and talk with my son and daughter-in-law and found out how disappointed my daughter-in-law was. I called the bank on Monday morning to stop payment on the check, and Rob had already presented the check to the bank, or I would have stopped payment on the check, and then we would be in a different situation. I immediately sent him an email outlining all of my
Which I have.
complaints, the poor service. The service was deplorable.
And what was your response to that, sir, about
I contacted the
service?
person that I had the contract with, which was her son,
Why didn't you return her message or her phone call?
because I deal with the people I have the contract with.
No, not the people who write you the check?
No, ma'am, it's the person that I have. In the state of Texas,
You are
deal
so
with
arrogant. I mean, you are absolutely arrogant. I'm floored by this because she is writing your check. She is paying you, and you won't even have the respect to return her phone call?
Your Honor.
Unbelievable. Hold on a second. Let me just
Okay.
read this letter from the venue.
Owner, she suggested that I request a full refund from him.
She recommended you to them. She put her reputation on the line, and she slams you. She does not have a dog in this fight. No, you cannot respond. Frankly, the only response I think you should have at this point is an apology to the plaintiff and his family.
It won't happen.
It may not happen, but you're going to pay them their money. My judgment in this case is for the plaintiff, $868 plus court costs. Thank you.
I do think that Judge Faith ruled properly in this case, but there's something about Judge Faith that I want to touch base on when it comes to especially wedding-themed cases, because I feel like she gets her emotions too involved in these cases, and then it ends up being that she gives a verdict that doesn't necessarily feel the most fair. Now, I do think that he did, probably mess up with his catering for the wedding, but the thing is that he still brought food and they still ate. So I feel like what he should have had to do is pay a partial amount of money back, not the full amount. Because, let's be honest, he still brought food and he still did provide somewhat of a service. Now, I think that there could be grounds for where it's like, he didn't bring the correct food, or it was very different, or it was cut corners, and, it's a wedding, so it makes sense. But I want to know what you guys think, because I'm on the fence, and I'd love for you guys to convince me otherwise, because I'm on the fence. So please let me know in the comments down below, who do you think is in the wrong? Who do you think Judge Faith should have made a verdict for? Was it fair? Do you agree with Judge Faith? Let me know.